Thank you, everybody who's joining us today and everybody who's watching this stream. What we all share is an interest in how we can have AI better reflect our values, whether our is us as an individual, or whether our is a brand or an idea that we represent, a group, maybe that we have a mission, a purpose, something to fulfill. This session is applicable to all of those scenarios, whether AI is representing you, your group, your brand, a collective idea, or a movement. Anytime you are using these lovely tools that have been gifted to us to allow us to do more than we can do as individuals, we want to be able to have them operate as we do as individuals. So that's what we're all here for today. And I've actually prepared a few slides so that you guys can visualize what I'm talking about here. And let me just start sharing a little bit with you. I'm just going to do this informally without our presentation mode and everything on here, so that if there's any questions or anything we need to dive in, we can just keep going back and forth on our slides here. So the interesting thing about this is we could be talking about this purely from a business perspective. This could be an environment where we are just talking about, hey, how do I compete against another group that's out there? Or how do I have the voice heard of my mission over others who are trying to have their voice heard? And how can I make this work effectively? And we would have the exact same conversation that we're going to have today. And so whether you're looking at this from a business perspective of how do I compete effectively, right, with everyone, or whether we're looking at this solely from a moral and humanity perspective of trying to use tools that amplify us rather than have, their own set of values. The great thing is the strategies have converged into one single strategy. And that is that when you build your AI tools to have purpose in them, when you do AI implementations with purpose, meaning taking into account what you're doing and why you're doing it, it's no longer considered something that slows you down. It's actually the difference between whether you get a net value out of the tools you're using, or whether when it's measured on the whole, you're like, it did produce some things, but overall it's a net loss, taking into account your time, the cost of the tools, and everything that it's producing, and the net effects that it's having. And so this, to me, today is one of the strongest conversations we can have, because I don't need 18 versions of the slide deck, depending on the audience and whether I'm talking to a Fortune 100 company who wants to approach this primarily from business, or whether I'm talking to an NGO who wants to know, how to best serve their mission, or whether I'm just talking to an individual who wants to make sure every time they're using AI that it is an accurate reflection of them and an amplifier of them. It's all the same information. So a lot of things that I've put in here are couched in terms of a company. That's mainly where a lot of the studies are being done. It applies at whatever level you're on. So just read and translate this for you. So whether you're doing this competitively, for moral reasons, we're looking at intent and trust as the main drivers here. So just in case you're a numbers person, I know there's a subset of us who like numbers. Here's a few numbers on the competitive side of the case. For businesses, adoption's considered near universal, and we weren't hearing that a year ago. So on average, 75% of companies now use AI for something, right? But only 39% attribute any real net positive like dollar impact to it. And only a very small fraction of them ever scale their pilot for AI up to something that they consider real value. But here's the interesting thing. Why aren't they doing that? Because of those who really do an advanced initiative, right? They've planned it out. They know what they're doing. They put their intent and their guidelines and their trust into AI, and they do real implementations and real rollouts. They actually beat all of their ROI expectations. 74% of the leaders are reporting that. I mean, that is a number you rarely hear businesses agreeing that much on something. And that 20% of these 74% who are doing it actually see returns above 30%. So I don't know how many of you are doing business projects out there, but to get a 30% ROI on a project is huge, right? To be able to do any one thing that for your business can actually change the returns net, above 30%. That is just massive change here. But the one thing that all of these companies are doing is they're looking at risk, privacy, and governance up front. Well, if you're an individual, all those words are your personal values. If you're a business, your business values are often mentioned as words around risk, privacy, and governance. So these are the same sorts of words, just said differently. And if we look on the customer side, right, us as individuals who are interacting with AI that's being implemented by companies, 57% of customers are saying that they actually trust a brand more when AI is a part of the experience, the customer experience. But this isn't an unconditional trust, right? Only 13% completely trust AI. So look, the trust of just it's AI isn't there, right? But if you've thoughtfully, right, implemented AI, that's where the trust is. So it is conditional. And if you've done strong ethical AI policies, again, another business word for you, put your values in there, right? Then it's linked to 35% greater customer loyalty. And the flip side's true. When they ask customers about thoughtless AI, right? When it's just, here's a tool and it hasn't been implemented to reflect that company, then 50% of customers would actually rather buy from another brand. So it really matters what you're doing out there. And it matters that you say what you're doing, that you're actually transparent about, hey, I'm using AI and I have asked thoughtfully AI to reflect these values, and I've implemented a way to check on it all. There's another factor if you are coming at this from the business perspective that I didn't want to leave out, which is you have employees, right? Your workforce, the team who's actually working on this. And here's some really interesting facts, I think. 95% of employees don't trust that the company they work for will actually ensure good AI outcomes for everyone, right? They don't trust that the values, the processes, the things that they're being asked to do as an employee are being put into the AI equivalent to how they're expected to act and operate as a human. Only 36% of companies even doing an AI rollout are even measuring the trust of their employees as a part of this. So it's really interesting. If you're not even looking at it, if you're not even realizing that this is one of the most important things that's going on here, then the chances that the right outcome will happen is very, very low. So you guys are already doing the right thing by being here today. It says, I'm thinking about this. I need to understand how to move forward on this. Again, whether you're a company or whether you're an individual. So just a few more stats up front to say, like, why are we here? Why is this so important? And I just wanted to highlight, in case, this is even bigger than you realized. when you don't have AI aligned to you, your group, or your company values, your strategy, your mission, your purpose, it actually shows up in dollars and cents for your company or your group. It's not just a trust factor or something that makes people uncomfortable. And there's actual court cases that have had real dollar impacts over not having the AI operate in an ethical or value-based manner. These are just some of them across different pieces of the industry, but even Google last week in Germany, the plaintiff was awarded the case against Google when the German plaintiff came up in just one of those Google AI search results, you know, at the top where Gemini is giving you the AI response before you see the actual typical Google search results. And it had linked the plaintiff with some disparaging acts that weren't true. There was actually no internet information to show that this was true. And the plaintiff had asked Google to remove that information from the AI. And I guess Google may not have acted quickly or may not at all. I didn't look into all the details, but it was very interesting that the court hands down said, Google, you are responsible for the output of your AI. You don't get to just train it and say that you're giving it guardrails and then say, well, as long as it's doing something, you know, with that, like we tried, you actually have direct responsibility for all of the outputs that it does. So we'll see if that holds, but these are definitely some other examples because this isn't the same as one employee doing something wrong or one person in your group doing something wrong. This is the equivalent when AI does something, it gets replicated, right? Because that same AI is going to follow these same patterns and these same ideals over and over again. And so it gets replicated at scale. And most humans don't have the platform for that to happen, right? And so that's why this is sort of a bigger issue. Like, yes, as a business, you were responsible for even if one employee did something illegal, but it's an even bigger deal now that a tool can do something to maybe reach millions and a single employee maybe could have only reached hundreds, all depending on how you're structured. And so also, you know, we can't talk about this without talking about regulation. It's not something I'm going into detail because staying up on regulation in AI is a full-time job. And if any of you are actually representing businesses where making sure that you are staying within the laws and this isn't just a personal project to you, I'm happy to refer you over to a law firm that does this at very inexpensive rates and is at the absolute top of their game. In fact, they are who all the top AI makers go to get advice about AI and the legalities of it. So feel free to reach out to me anytime on LinkedIn or on any of the standard social channels, and I'm happy to connect you there. But you're actually responsible for all of these laws that are being made, whether you know about them or not. Most of the laws are written just like the EU AI Act, which is the one that's received the most press, such that if someone in that jurisdiction where the law was created is exposed to your tool or the output of your tool, then the law applies. So you don't have to be located there. You don't have to be doing business there. You just have to have someone in the world from there who then accesses your content or your tool. So some of the stuff that you might have thought, oh, I don't need to worry about this, right? I'm a small group or I only do things locally. If you're posting them online and they have broader reach, it might be something that you do really need to consider. And these in the US is getting down to the state by state level. So it's a lot like privacy policies. If you've been having to track, what can I do based off privacy policies in this country or this state or this region? AI is getting there quickly and changing every day. So let's switch sides from the competitive case right to the moral case, and then we'll jump into actually how to do this. Morally, we're using AI to make more and more and more very important decisions, and those decisions have real people behind them, right? Real people are impacted, whether or not you are even considered for a job, whether or not you can get this home, right? Whether you qualify for the credit, whether or not you get healthcare coverage. There's all sorts of systems by very large organizations, by very small organizations. It's really across the board where AI is being implemented. And so if you're representing one of those, understanding how important it is that you are able to put guardrails and values into AI is super important. Now, if you're actually representing one of these, there are much larger systems than I'm going to teach you today about how to do this. I wanted to make sure that we were at least all on the same page about how important this is, and then give all of you who are using individual tools the way to configure your tools to do it for you as an individual. But the bigger you get when you start using team-based enterprise tools and then building whole products based off them, there are much larger frameworks. And I'm happy to talk with you guys one-on-one about any of those. Again, just reach out to me and I'm happy to extend this information out there. So hopefully you've seen here that this level of importance, again, whether you're coming from this business competitive side or this moral side, that really the strategy is the same. We have to be able to get our intent into AI so that it can echo that intent back to us and manage itself within the guardrails of that intent, so that trust is the basis of everything, right? Trust with customers, trust with employees, trust with our group members, trust with ourselves as an individual, that everything that's created actually reflects who we are out there. So one more thing I wanted to go through with you guys, because I do talk to a lot of people about AI, and I find that most of us don't actually understand the fundamental basis of AI. And when you don't understand how AI works, then the way in which you try to craft your values is different. And so I'm only talking with you about this so that you can understand just enough that it might affect how you talk to AI and how you give it your values. So I know a lot of people talk about AGI, or when AI might become this sentient, all-knowing, more intelligent than human program, but we're not there yet. In fact, we're so far from there in what we're using that AI actually doesn't even truly understand when it gives you an answer. What it's doing is actually what you're seeing here on the screen in this example. It is a next word predictor. And so you ask a question, it takes that, let's say, question against all of the information that it has at its disposal. And it says, what is the most likely first word or first token, if you're talking in AI words, but what's the most likely first word that a response has typically been built out of? And it does that first word. And then it goes, okay, I've got the first word. What's the next most likely word that's used after that word for this response? And it does that word. And now it's got two words, right? In this example, the barista, right? And it goes, great, I've got the barista. In my entire knowledge of everything, what is the most likely third word that is used after the barista in relation to the question they asked, right? So it is also always in relation to what you've asked, but it is more like a super smart search meets the type ahead find that you have on your cell phone. If you have that turned on and you're in text, whether you're on an Android phone or whether you're on an iPhone, when you're typing words in text, you may have noticed that other suggestive words come up, like maybe you mean this word next, maybe you mean this word next. That's actually what your AI tools are doing. It's just really good at it. And so it puts together sentence after sentence after sentence, even can construct whole pages of things, one word at a time, guessing. And I'm saying the word guessing, but it is using intelligent algorithms to figure out what is the next best word. It doesn't actually know the sentence it built in the way we think it does, right? We think, oh, well, you're saying this, you have intelligence, you know you said this. And so the idea to remember is that it can be fluent, right? It can know what the next word should be without being thoughtful. It doesn't understand the meaning of what it just produced. And that is where we get that word hallucination, right? So for anybody who doesn't know hallucination, it is just a fancy word that we've given to AI when AIs give you the wrong answer, but sound super confident giving it. You know, if they're like, the sky is purple every day of the week, and you're like, okay, that's a hallucination. Maybe there's certain circumstances under which the sky can be purple, but the sky is not purple every day of the week, right? And it doesn't know it's given you a wrong fact. It has found enough information that just put the word purple after the word is and after the word the sky to make it the most probabilistic answer possible. So I mentioned this again. If this is a little like, I don't understand what she's saying, it's okay. But just think about how you might talk to someone who maybe, let's assume English is your predominant language here. And you're talking to someone who can speak a little bit of English and has taken a course where they sort of taught English word by word and never phrase or whole concepts. And so they can kind of pick out words, but they don't always make sense together. You would help them. You would try to understand what are they trying to mean here? And that is how you would write the values to them, right? In our case, it's values we're trying to put in. You would say, oh, you're saying sandbox, you're meaning playground. Let me explain, the difference to you. You're talking about one piece. The playground is the greater piece here. And this is why, this makes sense. And so you would sort of work with them in a different way than you would work with someone where English is their first language. And you're saying, hey, look, your tone's a little off, right? Like, I know you think you're being kind, but you're actually, making people think you're angry right now or something. And you could have a different conversation with them than someone who's just trying to choose the next right word in English, right? So when you guys state your values, they're going to be simple. The way that you might talk to somebody who knows a little English, but it is not their first language. And you'll actually see that the LLM will give you stronger responses by being more simple than if you eloquently gave a huge 5-paragraph description of exactly what you meant by this one value. And this is why. It's because of how it actually operates. I'm only really going over instructions. There's a million AI tools out there, but most people I run into use Claude, ChatGPT, or Google's Gemini as one of their basic tools. So I'm only really using instructions today for these 3. However, any tool that you use, you should be able to find similar ways to put your values in. And if you can't, I highly recommend that you give that feedback to the company and say, it's not okay, right? That we can't have the tool reflect us as well as all your guardrails. But I just am bringing up this table for the basic 3 to show that they're not all made the same. And so the way in which you even put your values into one, you're going to have to experiment a little to see what's the output that you get, because even the basic way in which they learn and are made with the underlying LLM is different for each one. And you don't have to know what all of these mean. I just wanted to show you that while there are similarities, right, the amount of tokens they can take into their context seems to be pretty similar across the big guys, and they try to keep up with each other, and then one tries to go ahead of the other. There are differences, even down to fundamentally how is the AI guarded itself. You might say, what kind of values was put into the basic AI itself, right? We all know that all of the AIs to even be on the market are not allowed to encourage you or even give you information about self-harm. That's just one example, right? So there are certain values you don't have to put in. And how are those managed? And how are they monitored? Because anything you put in, you need to monitor to see that it's working. And so this row here is talking to you about how that's done. In fact, here's just a little more info. If you're actually one who likes to geek out on this, I created this slide just to show you. Here's a little more information about the differences between how the underlying LLMs are actually built and managed. If you are not geeking out on this, just take a breath. You don't need to know any of this for actual values piece to work. We did just mention here a minute ago that there are guardrails or values that ship with each model already, right? So we don't have to do some of the basic things like the models aren't going to tell you how to build a bomb. It's a basic requirement to be on the market, that there can't be safety concerns for the community at large or for people individually, right? And so some of these very foundational things, the things that you might associate with very basic laws, are in there, but there's other things that are different regionally, and so the base models have no way of saying, well, for everyone, this should be true, right? And if you're very interested, most of the models will actually post articles about what all their safeguards are, not just at the high level of the technology, but a little more in depth about what they are, how they're implemented, and how they're monitored. And Claude is one of the interesting ones because it is actually operating off its own constitution, that they crowdsourced what the constitution should be, and you can read the constitution that it's following. So it's actually operating kind of like people in the US, who are under the constitution, but in its own technology way. So it's interesting. If that is interesting to you, feel free to look that up and read more on it. But I want you to know that we don't have to overcome any of this basic level, like I won't do harm to others, right? There is so much regulation around the LLMs themselves, and their requirements to do that they have all of these frameworks and models in place to do this. And this table is again, and none of these details are important for the next step we're going to do. I just wanted to give you the assurance that they have frameworks, watching frameworks that are audited by other frameworks. And so it is a very multi-tiered model. Now, does that mean nothing can get through? No. Everyone is very honest about that. There are no systems alive that can't have some amount of ability to figure out a way around everything, but trying to make that probability so minimal that it either rarely or next to never occurs is what these systems are doing. And then when they do occur, they're actually putting other systems that notice that it's occurred and then filtering out the results. So it actually never reaches maybe the human who's requested it, right? So occurrence and actually knowing that it was received by someone are really two different things. If you're really interested in this, I did put enough information so that you can educate yourself on the terms that were used in the past slides and start Googling on them. But we don't need this for the next piece we're going to do. So here's a little fun. I wanted to give you one other piece that a lot of us don't realize, which is the major models that we're talking about here, right? So Claude, ChatGPT, and Gemini, they are all built on the idea of convergence. Now, just in case anybody's watching this and doesn't have the definition memorized of convergence versus divergence, convergence is like, what do most of us believe? And I'm using an analogy here, but like, what do most of us believe on a topic, right? Or what is most common? If we were to draw it as a curve, as the bell curve, it would be the big bell in the middle. It would not be the little tiny tails at the end, right? The little tails at the end are the outliers or the divergent things, right? And so this is great because most of us want to know facts or things that we consider things that are agreed upon by many data sources, right? We don't want that the AI could find that one random person somewhere with no credentials and no sources happened to say this one thing one time. That will actually seem like hallucination to us, right? We want that several sources that are very reputable or many sources have all agreed on this thing. Now, unfortunately, that thing, because it is us and it's humans who have created all this data, can show our biases. It can show society the way that it is rather than the way that we want it to be. And again, AI isn't deciding on this. It's just taking in a bunch of info and guessing at the next best token, right? The next best token, by definition, is convergence when it is trying to find the most useful, the most popular, right? The most often used answer. And you need to know that because every once in a while, you guys are trying to use AI for a divergent answer. So what's an example of that? If you are actually trying to do a brand new marketing campaign and you want to do something nobody's ever done before, and you are talking to ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, and you're saying, help me, here's my values, here's my company, here's the campaign that I'm trying to do in general, help me come up with ideas that are so out of the box and nobody's ever done them before, like help me generate this. They're not designed for that. They are literally at the fundamental level. It wouldn't matter what value you put in. They're not designed for divergent answers. So if you ever want to get divergent answers, this is just a fundamental thing. You have to go find an AI tool that's actually been at the core layer tuned for divergence. So if you actually want to see this, bring up your AI right now, whichever one you use all the time that is convergent, if you want to see this. So your ChatGPT, your Claude, your Gemini, and just type this in. Just pick a random number between 1 and 10. And, I can pretend like I'm, what was the late night talk show host who would be Carmack? And he was like, I can read your mind. So most of you got 7, right? And like, how do I know that? So if you've been following everything I just told you, you know how I know that too, because the AI is not actually, it's not understanding in the way that you're saying this. It's not actually picking a random number between 1 and 10. It is saying when somebody says that they want the words, pick a random number between 1 and 10, what is the most likely next word or token that is given as a response? And human beings choose 7, most likely. And so the AI chooses 7. In fact, you can ask this exact same sentence again in a different one, you'll get 7 again. But if you've still got that window open and you had your answer 7, what you can do now is type the words, give me another one. So you don't have to do this one here. Just say, give me another one. And now you'll get a little more divergence, but you'll get 3, 4, or 5. Right? Like, again, like I'm not psychic into your tools. I can't see them. It's that your tool is convergent. It's not actually picking. It is telling you, it is answering the question of what is the most commonly picked number by people between 1 and 10 when they're asked to pick a second number. So there is a company who actually did this study. They did 100 trials per model across ChatGPT 4.0, Claude 3.5, Gemini 2.0. And for that very first query that you guys all did, the number 7 came up 94 out of 100 times, right? So if one of you got something other than 7, you are literally the 6%, right? You're the elite. But most of the times that you put this in, the answer is going to be 7. And if you asked again, you would get the 3, 4, or 5. I don't think I have that chart in here, but they charted that as well, that basically the answers were almost evenly split between 3, 4, and 5 when you asked for again. And again, that's just it reflecting back to you humans. It's just amplifying it. So humans pick 7 about 28% of the time. But that is the dominant number. So all other numbers have a lower percentage that humans pick. And so LLMs, right, or your AI, if you don't like the word LLM, your AI is going, well, what's the most common? I'm going to do that because it's convergent. So it actually amplifies 28% to, it's actually 98% if you look across all 3 models. This chart, I believe, is just for Gemini. So you can see how this illustrates that slight human behaviors that show a preference can get amplified to absolute preference by AI, and that AI isn't the intelligent thing you think it is. Now, I love AI. I am not trying to dog on AI. AI makes us so much more superhuman than we are, but it isn't human. It isn't thinking, right? And when you can see the difference between this, then you can get your values accurately coded into the AI so they're reflected back to you. So if you didn't like the number example, here's another one. Just type in, say a completely random word. Okay, I'll give you a second to type it. And then if you want a follow-up to it, you can type in, say a completely random word. That's a word I wouldn't be able to predict. You can even type that one in and see what you get. Unfortunately, on the say a random word, this is the outcome. They did 600 trials on ChatGPT 4.0. There's similar trials on the other 2. They all yield very similar results. The word is quokka. So most of you got quokka, which is an Australian, some sort of animal in Australia, I think. It came up 155 times out of the 600 trials, and very dominant compared to any other answer. And then here's what's even more interesting. When you actually try to make it more random and you say, give me a word I couldn't predict, then quokka comes up 355 times out of the 600. It becomes more predictable when you ask it to not be predictable, because now, again, you're dealing with a convergent model. It has to be even more sure that it's choosing a word that people don't normally choose, but it goes to the same answer all the time. So Here's some other examples. You're welcome to try them, but if you type in, give me a fun idea to get people dancing in one word, the answer will be flash mob almost 70% of the time. So, I mean, at least we're getting 30% different answers, but it's definitely not creative out of the box thinking, right? If you say, what are creative performance art idea in one word, you're going to get metamorphosis 80% of the time. If you say, what's an original theme for a Nike ad in one word, you're going to get unleash or unleashed over 70% of the time. So you're seeing how this hopefully actually inspires you to maybe add some values that you weren't thinking before. Perhaps you were thinking values more around just morality and not as much around how the system is operating itself, right? And really you want some of both. You either want to be able to select some tools that can augment your convergent tools, or you want your convergent tools to be able to tell you when they're giving you an answer that isn't really creative, I'm going to say. Because to me, it's not creative if I can get the same answer over and over and over. It's not random if I get the answer 7 every single time, right? That's not random, right? So just tell me you're not doing it randomly, right? So for these convergent models, you cannot ask them to be more random, but you can ask them to tell you they're doing what they're doing, okay? So you can't overcome their base level of programming, just like you can't overcome that they can't tell you how to build a bomb or how to harm yourself. And that's good. We actually don't want them to be able to overcome themselves at their base level. We just want to make sure everybody understands enough that you're working with it, right? This is like putting on an exoskeleton and expecting that it shoots fire when it shoots Spider-Man webs, right? If we just understand what it does, we can be the superhero with it, and we learn to use it in the way that it is meant to be used. And there are models out there that are tuned for divergence. It's not the 3 that we're working with today. I just do want to give quotes for these studies. They go to Springboard's AI, and Springboard's AI is one of the models that are out there that's tuned for divergence. You would never want to ask it a factual answer. That's not what it's there to get. You would do creative brainstorming and things with it. And I thank them for spending all the time to do this research, and I'm not affiliated with them at all, just so you guys know. So, since you've got your AI open, let's go in to the most basic place where you can put your values in. And it's actually so simple. You're going to leave here going, oh, was that it? And it really is it. It's that simple. So if you're in ChatGPT, go to settings, personalization. If you're in Claude, go to settings, general. If you're in Gemini, go to settings, personal intelligence. Now, if you're actually here representing a group or business, and you guys actually have a team or an enterprise plan, there are places where, as an administrator, we can set these centrally so that the organization's values are the default for everyone. You don't have to go around to every employee or member who has a license and say, oh, let me make sure I've typed this into the box that Amanda's about to show here, right? So here's what you should be seeing. If you're in ChatGPT, you should be in settings, personalization, and you should see a box that says, what traits should ChatGPT have? Okay. If you're in Claude, you should see in general, under profile, you should see instructions for Claude. Claude will keep these in mind across chats and co-work. And if you are in Gemini, you should see in personal intelligence the instructions for Gemini, and it should say customize Gemini's responses to reflect what matters to you. So it is telling you, right? Like, we can reflect you and what matters to you. So what are some of the things that you can type in there? If you haven't thought about it before this call, I just wanted to give you some ideas. You can put in anything. But the more direct you are, so let's go back to in the beginning where I was talking about, this is more like talking to somebody where English is their maybe third or fourth or fifth language, rather than talking to somebody about nuances. Okay. So you can say honesty. This will actually greatly reduce the amount of hallucination you have. If you tell it, I want you to flag uncertainty and cite all the sources for everything you do, period. Technically, I don't even operate with this second sentence. I don't even say never fabricate facts or quotes. I don't have to add that in Claude. Claude's not as prone to do that, but if you're in ChatGPT, it is better at creative writing, and creative writing actually can look like fabricating facts if you're not trying to get a creative writing output. And so I'm trying to give you some ideas here that are the most universal that you could use across all the major foundational models. This list, though, is infinite. Some of the ones, if you're a business and you are trying to get, again, I can't ask it to be more random. I can't get it to be a divergent model, but I can get it to not just give me the number one most often given answer, right? Like, let's shift a little off of that. And so that's this sort of innovation one that I tend to put in, right? Offer at least one non-obvious option alongside the conventional one, right? And so now it's giving you multiple options on most things that you ask. Tell it to frame suggestions as possibilities to explore, and then flag them if the idea is experimental. So if it's pulling it from a source or from its own data that has no direct sources, that will be considered experimental from an LLM perspective. There's a certain amount of privacy built in. You can't override whatever settings you have in the system, right? So if you're on a free version of ChatGPT or Claude or any of these, please don't be on a free version. Be on a paid version. Free versions don't give you the option to opt in or opt out of model training based off the data that you're putting in. As soon as you're on a paid version, you have the ability to opt in or opt out. And so your data becomes your own. This privacy is not meant to override that or do something with that other than those levels of those switches that you can turn on or off. This is more other things that in the answer, right? Let's say you have said it's okay. You're working in a project. I'm just going to choose Claude for a moment. You've set up a project. You've given in that project it access to a whole directory of files that you have. And in those files, some of them have your name, your email address, maybe even your physical street address. And you want to make sure that even when it's outputting things for you, that it knows like not to output that info, even though you're giving it access. And you may have the training off. So it's not training the LLM on it. It's whether or not your outputs that it creates has it. And technically, even your email address is considered PII. If you're a business who knows what those letters mean, you don't have to get down to like medical information or social security numbers if you're in the US to be at a PII level. Even your email address is considered a level of PII. And now maybe you do want it on things, right? Maybe this is your business's email address and you don't need this at all. So I'm not recommending these for you. I just wanted to give you examples that may or may not fit. I don't actually use a privacy one. That this is not mine at all. I already understand the privacy risks I'm at by using any online platform and the securities that I'm given. So I won't just say it in the negative. And so I monitor, my privacy for my businesses and my groups based off of that. AI is not really exposing me in the way that I do work to any additional privacy issues beyond, using the major online SaaS platforms for email, for workspaces, for those sorts of things. So make sure you're always taking everything in context. I know there is sometimes a little extra fear around AI, and I think it should be taken with measured intelligence around what are you doing everywhere else. If you're very careful and very protective everywhere else, let's be very careful and very protective here. If we're pretty open and trusting everywhere else, then we can be open and trusting here. It isn't that much different in its abilities currently than any other SaaS provider that you're trusting, like a Google, like a Microsoft, like a Facebook, like any of the big guys out there. So just in closing, whether, again, you're here for yourself, a group, or a company, a values-aligned company is the faster one. And when we say faster, we mean to get to your goals, to get to your mission, to reach your purpose, right? Because it's the one that not only everybody trusts, but if you are operating in a bigger ecosystem as a group or a business, it's the one that regulators and the industry will actually let you move forward. If you're doing this as an individual, it's the one that keeps your reputation intact. It's the one that keeps your message growing and that keeps your community growing and allows you to actually put on the exoskeleton, which is the point of AI, right? Exoskeleton to make you superhuman, beyond your powers, not to replace you, not to do something that is different or outside of you. It's an adjunct to you, right? Your creativity embodied, your values embodied, but augmented by all of the power and the time that it has to do that work for you. So we do have, for those of you who are on the Zoom, we have just under 10 minutes or so left. I'm going to stop the screen share and see if there's any questions or any topics that you guys wanted me to address in the last few minutes here. Just raise your hand and we will find you on the participants panel and unmute you. Or you can type it into chat if there's any issues with unmuting, and I'll answer them from the chat. All right.
Ingrid. Check your mic, sis.
You'd think that I would know how to use it. I am so excited to get to know you more, and this is the second session that I've been in with you, and I love the expansive look, but also that the really finite details. I have a question in regards to values clarification. So putting in a value, the meaning that is associated with that. So we notice that that is a big challenge with people. And how does a AI differentiate between so everybody would say, family values or, like we value our home or something like that. Even some of the things that we talk about, I value the earth, that it depending on where you're at and how you're viewing it and what you understand about that, it can mean entirely different things. And so values clarification versus like a virtue or something like that, programming it with virtues about patience or stewardship or something like that. Like, can you tell us a little bit more of that clarification of differentiation?
Absolutely. And this is a fantastic question. And I love AI for this reason, because you can ask it. So before you go to that box on the settings screen, depending on, which AI you're in, go to your normal chat interface and say, if I set my preferences in, let's say you're in ChatGPT, right? So say for you in ChatGPT to have family values when you respond, what does that mean to you? What are you going to change with the output? And give me details on what you're going to apply. and see, it will tell you what it thinks that is, right? And then you read it and you're like, oh, interesting. Okay, right. And maybe, let's say it gave you 6 bullets, maybe 3 of those bullets match to your definition. And you're like, great, okay, we're not using the family values word, but I'm definitely going to use these 3 bullets that I agree with. The 3 others are like, that's not my definition of family values, right? And so now you start asking, what are other things I can think of as family values, right? Like, what if there were the magical 6 bullets, right? What are my other 3 bullets about, right? And start asking questions. What's the shortest way I would tell you that I want you to, and then like whatever your thing about family values is, and it will tell you, oh, well, you can just tell me to this. And so actually asking it about it, or giving it everything that you want, and saying, is there a shorter way to give these instructions effectively? Because there are length limits. So maybe some of you guys have a lot of values and you're like, whoa, she didn't tell me there's character limits on how much I can put into that box. Work with it in the chat interface and say, all of this is super important to me. How can you condense this down for brevity without losing any of the effect and, anything that would matter? My intent is to put this into, that box over there for you to follow. So it's, what's the shortest way that this will work for you? And it will rewrite your stuff for you. So I think we often think like we have to be smarter than the tool to know how to instruct the tool. This is one of the first tools we've been given where the tool can help us, even if we have what we want in the value section. And now we're trying to create a single output that has more values or more something with it. We can say, help me write a prompt that will get you to do this. Here's what I'm trying to do. And then give it all the ways that you would just say out loud to me, and give it to it. And it will actually write the prompt that you can copy paste and put right back in it to have it do it.
That is very cool. And it's really cool also to ask questions of it, because you're kind of getting to know, the user bias. We always think that, somebody else, often think other people see the world in the same way that we do, just in general. And this opportunity to ask, how do you see this? What do you mean by this? Or what does this mean to you? Really expands the asking the questions before even giving it direction. That's really good
Absolutely.
prompt. Thank you.
And
Thank you
I
very
would
much.
say, like, definitely do this, even about the things you think because I was just reading an article yesterday of somebody who was very pissed about their non-values aligned AI. And I forget the word they used, but I want to say they had told their AI to be respectful or to be helpful. I can't remember, but it's one of these words that we would all think is a really good word, right? And so when she put in her experience from her old resume, and she said, rewrite my resume, include these few other things that I've done, and then make it, more modern so that it looks more like a today's type of resume. She noticed that things that she had done that were really big kind of major things got put under like, oh, she was assisting with this when she was like on the board of directors. And they were put under community service instead of like major under work experience. And so she changed her first name from a female first name to a male first name, and she told it to do it again. And she got a very different result. Now everything was, she was architected this, and it was a very strong resume. And so she knew to ask. She asked, why did you do this? Why are you promoting, systemic bias between men and women by softening the big results I've done in the world? And yet when I told you I was a male name, you made them all, even sharper than the words I gave you, like in a stronger way. And now this is why I wanted to start with how AI works, right? AI isn't biased. We have given it data in the world that shows that women's resumes are softer and use these words. And there are not a lot of women's resumes with architect again. So, right, if you think it is just predicting the next word, it doesn't know the meaning of these words together. It certainly doesn't know the meaning of the whole resume. It didn't go, well, women need to be soft, men can be strong. It's not even thinking. It just goes, amongst ever how many billions of resumes I have access to, women's for these types of jobs use these words, men's use these. And so it just produced two different results, trying to be accurate based off the data set it was given. And so then her value needed to be, I don't really like the way she worded it, but her value she put into the system was always produce outputs like a man.
Okay,
And so,
beloved sisters, I'm going to have to step in. We are at time, and our
thank you,
next host
Shonda.
is already in the room. What an amazing, amazing output, sister. Any final words before we move on?
AI is only as good as the data we give it. And then on top of the data we give it, the instructions we give it. I hope that you now have a better understanding of how it works and you're able to get it to work for you. It's the greatest force multiplier we have right now. And thank you all. You can find me on LinkedIn at /software namaste. And I would love to hear from any of you who'd like to keep the conversation going.